Our next session will be Just Energy Transition and Decarbonization. Please welcome to the stage your moderator, Connie Chimoch.
Hi, hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely fantastic that so many of you are there. My panelists are there. As you can see, there is a free space, which we're going to fill very soon.
I'm here.
Wow, she magically appeared.
Yes,
wonderful.
after
So we
meetings.
have a full house, and it's exactly what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about energy, renewable energy. Isabella, I take it that you have had your energy renewed. I hope the lunch was fantastic. I know that we're going to have two incredibly energetic male panelists, and I only stress that simply because we've come from an all-female panel just a moment ago. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you all know what we're going to be talking about. If we can manage, we will get a little bit of the audience into the discussion, depending on how we get along with time. And this time, Isabella,
No, I'm free now.
two petit less than normal.
I'm sorry.
And let me start, as opposed to the last session, with praise. Well, not my own praise, but that of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And he said a couple of months ago, renewable energy is powering down the fossil fuel age. Record-breaking growth is creating jobs, lowering energy bills, and cleaning our air. Renewables renew economies. Now, I mean, that's a lot of praise in 3 sentences. Normally, we are used to other words from Antonio Guterres, but he said that in response to the report of IRENA, as you all know, the international agency that is concerning itself with the growth of renewable energies, and they have constituted 4 important aspects why renewable energies have grown, so that's definitely a good message. Record high renewable energy capacity additions in 24, 15% growth, fantastic. Renewables account for more than 92% of total power expansion in 24. Solar power takes the lead. Asia dominates, regional disparities persist, and then the one thing that we're going to be talking about is progress still falls short to reach the 2030 tripling target. And this is what we're going to be talking about, the challenges, like, yes, good news, but how are we going to keep up the good news, under which conditions worldwide, and what do we need? Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me start off introducing Isabella Teixeira. Most of you who are regulars here to the Global Solutions know that she is the former Minister of the Environment of Brazil, but today, and in the last couple of years, been co-chair of the International Resource Panel of the UN Environment Program, and many, many more aspects. On my left, Leonhard Birnbaum, and he is the CEO of E.ON, so from Düsseldorf, I'm from Cologne, so there's a natural barrier between the two cities, but not between us. So, the European card is being played because you're a vice president of the executive committee of BWED and a member of the executive committee of the German Association of Industry and president of Eurelectric. The reason that I'm stressing that is because it's going to be part of the conversation. Stefan Kaffere has been CEO of 50 Hertz. I hope that's also the English version of it. Member of the steering committee of the German-Belgian Elia Group Management Board since 2019. And I think the reason why all of these lights are working is because of your company. So thank you very much on that aspect. And again, you are also involved as a deputy in diverse European organizations. Now, first of all, Isabella, we've heard the big praise. Can we now lean back and say, it's going to work like that for the next 10 years? We don't actually need to do it anything, or what do we need to do in order to keep up the good news?
Okay, hello, I'm sorry for being
And you
one
don't
minute
have
late.
half an hour.
Okay. um, I used to be, as you know, absolutely pragmatic, but also optimist. Okay, and what we have today in the world is exactly you have energy addition agenda, not energy transition or only energy transition agenda. And this is very important to be observed because we're now discussing not about production but demand, supply. So we're going to supply and how the world is demanding energy. And it's not only because of, I'm not only discussing electrical energy, okay? I'm discussing energy mix. And also which countries are able to replace the traditional energy source to renewable ones. Is one thing. Another thing is also about technologies and how geopolitical perspectives come inside this agenda. Who has the domain? Each country has the domain of technological and competitive solutions and come to make sure that they can influence geopolitically. And this means the new narrative that will emerge from the climate crisis or the global crisis or the new world that's changing and the power of the control of narrative. This power, okay? Third, the challenge that climate change and now climate change brings to us is to replace the global energy systems. Did this. Uh, which countries can do this, considering and provide climate energy security, because it's not only to replace things, it comes with energy security, and this means that we have other trade-offs to manage. So I understand that when you go the decision of climate change, you have three decisions today on the table. The first one is electrification. Okay, it's funny for me. I'm sorry to be so informal. When you go to e-cars, for example, and this comes from developed countries based on the gray energy. Okay, and you go to discuss renewable energy or renewable fuels, for example, have barriers to discuss this. Second, you have electrification, so we have decarbonization. You go to supply chains and check decarbonization, how electricity and energy are critical. And third, the technological dependence, a new technological dependence when you go, for example, in China, or other countries that the domain of solar, etc. And you go into price. So my point here is, okay, we need to go in transitional way. This is something very important. But to discuss transitional way, I understand that to have other players, including the oil producers, into the room and check our vulnerabilities of the global energy system if we're able to replace things in the speed that we need because we have climate change happening. It's not something that will happen in the future. This is happening today. And the demand also because of this is so high. So I believe that we should discuss better energy addition together with energy transition if we want to figure out solutions and consider our challenges in this century.
Thank you very much for the eagle's view. And now we're going to have sort of two people that are commenting from a position of practitioners. And when I look at the website of your company, there's actually this tiny little bit of ambition saying, oh, by 2030, we're going to be completely banking on renewable energy. How? Under which conditions?
Yeah, our target is to cover 100% of the electricity demand in our control area, which is Eastern Germany and Hamburg. So 18 million people living in this control area by renewable energy in the average of the year in 2032. Last year, we reached a target of a little bit more than 73%. So the share of renewables is extremely high. And that's another proof of the progress you mentioned at the beginning with the quotes of the Secretary General of the United Nations and also the facts and figures of Irina. But of course, it's obvious that most of these quotes and facts and figures were only focused on the share of renewables, the increase of renewables, and the investments we have seen in renewables. It's all true, but it's not the whole picture of the needed transition. Like you mentioned it, it is also about sector coupling. It's also about how can we organize the expansion of the grid infrastructure. And of course, at the end, it's also about affordability of the transition and security of supply. We have seen in Europe a few days ago in Spain and Portugal a severe incident
Yeah.
Not yet clear what is the reason for that, but now security of supply, reliability of the system is back on the agenda. And of course, affordability is another key priority in the so-called energy trilemma. And that's not only a European discussion, I'm sure it's a discussion we will see also in the global south and worldwide.
The funny thing about talking about renewables in the context of the Spanish energy blackout was, of course, the renewables were supporting the restart because you could rely on it in the afternoon, of course not in the evening, but somehow it didn't quite work. It took a time, and maybe Leonard, you could sort of comment on that because you just tried to explain that to me, and then we're going to go to your question.
Yeah. Very simple. All assets in our systems need electricity to work. The moment there's no electricity in the system, all our assets don't work. And that's basically, that's true for PV assets. The inverters need power. That's true for a power station. What does an electricity power station need to start up? It needs electricity. But if there's no electricity in the grid, only certain special assets can start up. We call them black startup capability.
Okay, as we've just heard, Stefan, thank you very much for making it clear. We still don't know why that happened, but it probably was a wake-up call because suddenly energy was again in the news, and this time not because of some policy decisions. Now, looking at the operations of your company within the global demands, one of the four big wigs here in Germany, and certainly, of course, a standing in Europe, a transition means transition to, but also away from. Now that's balancing act. So how much can you put your weight on renewables and actually lift the weight of the old carbon system?
I think that's the wrong discussion. So IRENA really is, I mean, they are the advocates of renewables, so they actually make their claims on the progress of renewables. But we are actually, I would call it, we're a systems provider. Renewables are part of the system, but what the real interesting point is when you look at Europe or when you look at Eastern Germany is not that we need more windmills or more solar PV stations. Actually, we have already nearly more than enough. In certain areas, I'm the DSO, he's my TSO. Yeah. In Eastern Germany, we have areas where we have, the installed capacity, peak capacity is already 7 to 8 times higher than the peak demand. So actually I have enough renewables. What we need is a system that combines that all in a way that is affordable for customers.
Technical issue or a political issue?
No, it's both. And an economic issue, because if you actually combine the assets in the wrong way, you're just increasing the cost without adding any value. If I build an additional windmill in the northern part of Eastern Germany, likelihood is it adds cost to the bill of our customers, but it doesn't add more green renewable productivity. Why? Because when the wind blows, I can't use that production. So what we need is different thinking now. It's not about the next generator, it's about making the system as a whole better. The good news is that electrification is the solution. Electrification is helping for decarbonization, is actually increasing security of supply, and if done right, is actually improving affordability. But only if we think about the system as a system and not as individual assets.
Thank you so much. And Isabella, I'm going to play it again once to you. What we're talking about today is, of course, the just transition. And well, I mean, certainly just energy transition is, that brings the social aspect into it. And I believe certainly in Germany, but also in Europe, a lot of the contra or the negative aspects associated with renewable energy is, we can't afford it, it will hit the poor, the rich can afford renewables. Globally, same question. Are we just concentrating on the global north, or are we taking in the global south as well?
I think that we have different complexities when you go into global north and global south. When you go to discuss just transition, okay, and you go to discuss this together is transition away, because on climate change is this, okay, the decision that you need to manage. It's just means equitable, ordered, and also fair Okay, if you go in the global south, we don't have homogeneity among the countries. We have really social inequalities, asymmetries. It's not only to access energy, it's how you can pay for this. All the arrangements for tariffs, for example, how technology, how you can have subsidies and incentives, how you're going phasing out incentives and go to subsidies for phasing up solutions and to make sure that you can minimize the inequalities or the social asymmetries. In huge countries like my one, in Brazil, we have our electricity system based on renewable. It's around 92%. This is a national interlinked system, okay? But in my opinion, we are not prepared to face, consider justice or just transition, the climate risks when you go to generation, transmission, and distribution, and go to private sector to pay for this. Because we have climate risks as an uncertainty. Nobody can manage this, but you have costs. So, in my opinion, is that we need to go nationally to discuss very clear what just transition means, consider energy access, energy distribution, efficiency use. Efficiency is very critical to manage the pieces in short-term perspective. To be efficient what you have is a critical strategy, in my opinion, a critical pace to make sure that you can go manage trade-offs in short-term perspective. And this is really something critical because when you're exposed to energy crisis, you were in my country in 2001, yes, it was that it stopped, okay? We need to mobilize society, and society understood very well. So I think that we need to be open to make sure nationally and regionally how we can come together and understand our just demands, just transition demands, and try to combine outcomes that will impact globally. But it's very critical when you go to India, for example, Modi, the president, the prime minister said it's critical. Energy transition in India means energy source addition. Okay, and this is true. So we need to understand the realities and make sure that, in my opinion, step-by-step process and make sure how we can use energy efficiency first. First, because this will probably allow private sector to manage the costs and the uncertainties in short-term perspectives. And this is very critical because of investments and the costs of energy, considering industrial development, blah, 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 everything that means for us.
I'd like to hear your views on that, but hold that thought for a minute, because originally we would have had a voice from the South in this panel, or on this panel. As you know, with conferences, sometimes it doesn't happen, flight doesn't come, and the panelists can't arrive. However, since yesterday, we've had somebody who stepped in, and we do need a microphone to the first row, and Lauren Hermanus is from South Africa. She is running an organization called southerntransitions.org, and we yesterday had a quick chat about the view from the South, and especially I'm in South Africa, you know, you can't get more South. So share with us your view on the North-South divide.
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite a task to speak on behalf of the global majority. So I don't aim to do that. But I think maybe, you know, when we speak about the just transition, certainly in the African context, which is of course 54 diverse contexts, actually, the transition is put forward as a tremendous opportunity. I think the reality is that there's a tremendous need, but the concrete opportunity is actually far from realized and far from defined. So that's the kind of high-level point there, you know, that Africa is essential to the global transition, essential to the supply chains that feed into decarbonization elsewhere. However, this is at the moment really in a largely extractive relationships. And that most African countries remain stuck in low-value parts of global supply chains. And reversing this is actually a critical part of advancing what might be called a just transition, but I would say more it's a sort of holistic economic and energy transformation that needs to happen across the continent. So this is a little bit repeating what was said in the session that was here before, but you know, Africa's transition is not going to unfold through relationships of aid and dependency. What you need is to establish a sustainable demand, and the only way to do that is to have a level of industrialization and sustainable development that is integrated with, with this energy transformation that's required. So, yeah, just.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I already see your hand raised. You're going to be first. This is also a little pitch for later on. So if you're still around at 16:15, there's going to be a special session on African energy transition. Now, could I ask you to actually use your breath that you've held and put some words to it?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the topic of what is just. And it seems to me that the understanding is different. If we talk about a just transition within Germany, we will realize that there are people who actually benefit a lot from the energy transition, all those who can invest. And there are people who don't benefit, they just get higher bills. So this is just unjust in the German context. We have just heard that in the context of, when energy is not given, you have no energy, then just is, do I have energy or not? It's not a question of affordability, because if the alternative is to have none, you go for a diesel aggregator, which is the most expensive way to do that. So just is, do I have it or not? But in Germany, everybody has it, so the question of just moves to the field of who benefits. We just heard an even broader discussion. Just is if the transition actually leads to the development of some areas, which is actually far beyond only energy, because we were talking about industry. And so maybe it's like, then the question for me becomes, okay, so how do we make a just transition work if just is something different in all different contexts? And my answer would be, we need to make it good business. If it's good business, it happens. If it's not good business, it doesn't happen. It's like the transition of Africa will happen if we can identify good businesses that are sustainable by themselves. Affordability happens if it's good business to invest into the infrastructure. And if it's not good business, the investments won't be there. And so that would be maybe my point, different types of just, but in the end, always good business or not.
Absolutely, and actually that reflects some of the ideas that we've had in the circular economy discussion earlier today. Now, Stefan, you're actually sort of part and parcel of the World Energy Council, German section, but still, how is that reflected, that kind of discussion on just energy transition in the World Energy Council? And is there also a north-south divide, or are you talking about political and technological answers?
Yeah, of course, also in the World Energy Council, we have seen a north-south divide. And I think one of our challenges at the European level or the Northern European level is to develop a positive narrative of the energy transition. Because I'm fully convinced that a just transition is working. Access to energy is easier with renewable energies in many emerging economies. That's very clear. One of my former posts was Secretary of State in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany 12 years ago. I was in South Africa signing an energy partnership with our South African colleagues. And also at this time it was obvious that these coal power plants are something which has to be phased out, and we need a higher share of renewables to organize just transition and decarbonization in South Africa. And not much has happened. So Leo is fully right. We need these kind of business cases and acceptance for these kind of business cases to make it happen. Underestimating the positive narrative, let me just highlight this. Often also in Europe, people have not yet recognized how successful the energy transition was when we look at the decarbonization aspect. Germany will reach its target to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions between 1990 and 2030 by 65%. So it's a success story. So now we have to look at the other aspects.
But it's not being communicated.
It's
Therefore,
not yet
everybody's
communicated
worried.
because we have a group of people which is mainly interested in designing apocalyptic scenarios to mobilize people. But people will not be mobilized by these kind of messages. People will be mobilized by success stories, by positive business cases, by opportunities. And that's underestimated.
But forgive me, Isabella, but what is a good business case? I.e., how are you going to steer E.ON in order to make good business, take along people, and keep energy affordable?
Okay, so I will come across very cynical in a second. So
That's all right. We've been
before I
warned.
do that, let me just add that I like the positive narrative point. If you always tell the world is going to die, the world is going to end, our experience is then the reaction is, okay, if it's going to end anyway, I might have at least have a fun end. Yeah. So why should I invest into the future if the end is near? So this repetition of always more doomsday scenarios is not going to get us anywhere. Actually, we see a clear counter-reaction in Europe of parts of the population which you will not reach with even more negative warnings, etc. So that's one. So I'm investing. So I'm investing. We are approaching something like 10 billion euros a year. That's what my company is investing. 98% goes straight into the energy transition, and then we have some IT systems, etc. And it's very clear I can do that if I earn more in return that I have to pay in interest for this capital. And why is that the case? The energy transition.
And you can?
I can, but at the moment I cannot, I need to stop investing. And so if you want to say what the energy transition is, you could also say coal stations are burning coal, renewable stations are burning capex. Yeah? Because what you need is, you don't need to burn fuel anymore, but you need to have lots of capex to build this system in the first place. Once you have built it, it's actually cheap. But it's very expensive to build. Now, if we now say the energy transition is about taking huge amounts of capex and putting it into assets, then it means I need huge amount of assets, of capex. I can get that capital from capital markets. Financial markets will give it to me if they get a return. If not, I need charity. But charity and donations are always limited. So that's my point. If it's a good business case, I make money, I will have the money, I can invest. If I don't make money, I will not have the capex to make the energy transition work.
Isabella, do we just need to change the narrative? Just sort
No,
of, saying, we've been quite good?
No, I don't need to change the narrative because you know that I'm so pragmatic. But when you go in just transition and you go into climate change and the decision to transition away, people really don't understand very well, think that we need to stop producing oil gas because the producers need to stop and forget the consumers. But when you go in just transition, it's just order and with equitative ones. These are different means when you go into energy. I can tell 2 examples very quickly, very fast. First one in Brazil, this is a huge country with an integrated national electric system, and you had a program 25 years ago, to provide energy for these isolated people that didn't have access to energy. The Luis Fatodo is power for everyone. What are the consequences? Let's discuss just. Well, I remember when I have a child that accessed energy in the rural areas and could study. Today, this child became a doctor and changed because we have different public policies and we have also economic model that allow private sector to invest after the investment of the government. This is one thing. Another thing is when you go to disruptive process. That's why just transition must be ordered. We cannot stop the world to replace things without all the conditions to provide energy for the global economy, consider social aspects and socio-economic aspects. So should be very careful because we have countries without any alternative, without fossil fuels. It is true. So the debate everyone must understand, if we want to tackle climate change, we need to replace the global energy system. How can we do this after 200 years that put investment and consolidate things based on fossil fuels? We can do this? Yes. But we need to understand to take time, and we need to understand the diverse situations around the world. And that's why in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, we have one condition, non-sub-Saharan Africa, we have another condition. And you go to Latin America, we have one condition, you go to Brazil, we have a different condition. You need to understand the demands when you go to just, and to make sure that private sector could be engaged. And as he mentioned, I need to keep investing. If not, we have the backlash. This is the bad idea that we can have. So it's complex, but I believe that you can do it, but it will take time, okay? And it will take time.
On the way to Stefan, I offer you, ladies and gentlemen, the chance that 2 can put in a quick question. Two of you could put in a quick question, but Stefan first. You mentioned that energy security is an important aspect, and now security is only felt when it doesn't exist, as we saw last week. Unfortunately, you know, it was far away in Spain and in Portugal. How much do we have to pay for this energy security in order to feel happy and know that everybody is safe?
It's not so far away because we all know that Europe has a single market of energy. So something which is happening in Spain and Portugal has an impact to the rest of the TSO grid infrastructure in Europe.
But I mean, just because we got a couple of windmills in the North Sea doesn't help necessarily get Madrid back on the grid.
No, we were successful in splitting up the control area in the European market because the interconnectors between France and Spain at the moment are extremely limited. So imagine this would have happened in Poland or in the Czech Republic, which is in the heart of Europe. It's a totally different situation.
Then
so
we would
more
have
support situation, of course, if something happens, but also a higher risk if there's an incident in Croatia or in Romania, that this has an impact to the neighboring countries and the whole European system as well. Also now we pay a high price for energy security, but there is no alternative to it because we have in Europe and in Germany especially one of the most safe system of the world. Last year we have seen that every household in the average had no electricity for 12 minutes per year. So annually it is an extremely safe system and it is worth to invest in this kind of security, and this will be needed also in the future.
I think Isabella disagrees.
Yes, no, I agree, but I think that to have other side of the coin, okay? We go into energy security, we also need to discuss political economy and also geopolitical game, because countries not necessarily have self-sufficiency in energy production, energy source, sorry. So the dependence on, in the case of Europe, we have some arrangements in the Western Europe. What's happened with Russia is very illustrative, and also Ukraine. So that's why we are coming back to discuss energy security in the world, consider the new geopolitical arrangement on the new international order. And this will be in the room some years, okay? Unfortunately, but this is part of this new debate of the new international order that the states are designing. It's not private sector that is designing this, it's the states. So pay attention, because energy security and climate security and mining security will come together to figure out a new way to provide business and to provide energy security and energy efficiency, energy source, energy, electric, everything that everyone would like to have.
I wasn't inattentive, I was just looking around. Oh, yes, there is a gentleman in the first row, so we'll take him, but I know that you're bursting with an additional remark.
It's
so
just because this is so much our job to provide security of supply in the first place. We have seen in Spain how expensive it is the moment we don't supply it. It was 8 hours, or was it in the end 4 billion, yeah, plus a few fatalities, whatever. So it means the cost for not being safe is just humongous. So we should be pretty relaxed about that. But it's, as Stefan said, we need to really understand what has happened, but still we should acknowledge that the European system is one of the best in the world.
Wonderful. Sir, could you still introduce yourself? I only saw the name Ulrich, sort of at a glance.
Of course. I'm Ulrich Rigolat, lawyer from Germany, and I have a question to all of you. I have the impression you prepared your statements before drill, baby, drill. And how does the change of American politics will impact your forecast, not only concerning that the US politic changes, but keep in mind we will be forced to buy more liquid hydrogen from the US that doesn't improve the carbon balance.
Thank you very much for that very concise question. I'm just looking around, don't see. Second question from you, sir, and then we'll be answering it. So again, thank you very much. As concise as Ulrich's question.
This is Dr. Kashif Mangi from Berlin School of Business and Innovation. I am teaching energy management to different continental students, and I'm having, I would say, millions of questions, particularly from students who are coming from developing world. we are talking about most about Europe and I would say comprehensively West. So if we are talking about energy transition, what about the South Asia or East Asia? Because they represent around 60% of the humanity. If we are controlling decarbonization or we are paving towards renewable energy in Europe or even America, so what would be the consequences if we don't develop South Asia or particularly Asia and Africa regarding this fossil fuel stoppage?
Thank you very much for that question. So let's start off with Mr. Trump's influence, potentially. Who's going to go first? I know that you know each other quite well, so
It's overrated. I think drill baby drill doesn't impact economics. So we will not, I mean, gas-fired power stations are out of the money most of the time in Europe. This will not change because Mr. Trump is drilling more, if somebody's drilling more. Actually, I don't anticipate that somebody in the US will build new gas-fired power stations just because they're drilling more. The tendency will be clearly more renewables and then more backup capacity only if it's actually needed for capacity reasons, security of supply. So Trump can actually say it, but whatever he says doesn't change economics.
I think there's a German saying, your words in God's ear. Even though we know that Mr.
We might
Trump
be forced to do stupid stuff, but the economic stuff is clear.
Fantastic. Okay. An addition, Stefan? Or
I'm also extremely convinced that it is a big mistake because we have seen that projects now in the US are postponed when we look at offshore projects, when we look at transmission system operation projects, but it will be needed. At the end, direct electrification is the most cheapest way to let the economy running, and I think it's a mistake. And we will see it in Asia. That's the second part of the question. And I would imagine we see just now a lot of investments in renewable energies. You mentioned China, you mentioned, I think, India at the beginning as well. So we see it. Of course, it's not the same size which is needed as in Europe compared to the electricity demand situation, but there is a catching up situation we see in Asia, so I'm quite optimistic for the Asian situation in the future.
my question would be in enlarging your question, what we've seen up to now and the good figures that we've heard were driven a lot by the expansion of renewables in China. I remember sort of similar development a long time ago as far as poverty was concerned. China's drive at the beginning of the 2000s brought down the numbers of poverty around the world, and everybody could be really happy and saying, well, with the global development goals, we've made progress. What is going to happen when China gets to the point of saturation as far as renewables is concerned? Who are we looking to? Are we looking to Indonesia? Are we looking to India? Are we looking to South Africa?
And I can try to answer, consider climate perspectives, okay? When you go to net zero ambition, in the world you have an agreement that is from 2050 to 2070, okay? We discussed 2050, but India is 2070, and China is 2060. So considering climate change, and go to discuss net zero, even when we achieve net zero emissions, net zero, doesn't mean that we remove fossil fuels out of the global energy mix. Check the numbers. Please check the numbers. Okay, and we still will keep dependent on fossil fuels. Okay, so this is one thing. Another thing means how we're going to play energy security. Check the United States. And the energy security of the United States with President Obama that joined us with the Paris Agreement, it was based on shale gas and shale oil. This is fossil fuels. Okay. Third, when you go to China, China has a really big challenge to remove coal and to replace this for renewable energy. But at the same time, it's so intensive in energy when you go to electrification and also strategic minerals. All the solutions on climate change are really intensive in energy and also in materials. So this means that we put additional pressure on the environment, on the planet, etc., etc. Okay, so in Asia, this is a really very interesting question because there is no homogeneity when you go among these countries, and you have really the growth of population together with Africa. check the scenarios of population growth in the world by 2050, 2070, and you see the numbers. So my feeling is that not that China will not be able to provide things. I think that this will also depend on the new arrangement of international water that is happening. You could like or not, you can like or not, but it's happening, okay? And of course, how this will emerge, consider the priorities to deal, to manage energy security, consider renewable, and the cost of climate risks, consider the supply chains, and how you are able to pay for this or not. And this is very important to be observed, merely consider the other thing, the next comment, how these countries will be vulnerable to climate and nature crisis. This is very, very interesting. Never forget that the Global South, we have the natural resource and materials, but don't necessarily have the technology that you need to scale up our ambition. So this is how things will come. And my feeling is that climate change keep walking into the political rooms. Okay, even if you go to Greenland, you'll meet Amok there. Okay, so pay attention to this.
Thank you very much. I'm a bit confused because that clock and my clock don't agree. So I think I still have 4 minutes. So we'll do that last round. The two aspects that you would like everybody in this room to walk away with, your personal input from your expertise point of view, where are the biggest levers that we need to use in the next 10 years to get that just energy transition, first of all, in Europe, done?
Thank you.
Yeah, the thank you is for the Europe.
Thanks for the simplification.
Yeah.
Number one, we need to think about the energy transition of something that needs to achieve 3 goals simultaneously: security of supply, affordability, and sustainability. If we focus only on one target, we always struggle. That's the World Energy Council. Sorry for stealing that, Stefan. The second one is we need to think about the energy transition about a systemic transition and not as of a transition of adding one type of assets, i.e. renewables. Yeah. Those would be my 2 ones after this discussion.
Isabella, one minute, if you can.
My opinion is that we need to keep walking, okay, understanding the new context of the world, the reality, understand that the role of private sector is not only to add funds or financial, okay, they are political players, and also to understand the new limits that nature will impose. For example, we cannot manage electrification in Europe with the consumption of 10 times bigger than the materials or new or natural resource than other developing or poor country, low-income country. This is unacceptable. So nature will ask to pay the cost. So it's very important to understand the limits of our supply chain when you go to natural resource, the use of natural resource to provide electrification, decarbonization, and also renewable energy. I'm sorry, but this is the real world.
Thank you very much. Last word from you, and it can be less than a minute.
Yeah, my 2 messages are focused on the European situation, but it's the same for the whole world. First message, stop telling people that climate neutrality is a free lunch story. It's not realistic. No. And the second message is, let's stop micromanagement in the energy transition. We often have seen political micromanagement, but we need a situation where the different areas of the transition are working together, and that's not working if you have annual political ambitions, and that's micromanagement we have to stop.
May I say thank you, especially for the last short round, for making us punctual.
This is an exercise of macro management.
Right.
It's good.
Thank you very much for your inputs. You, ladies and gentlemen, will certainly take away whatever you want to take away and what you have heard. And we know that communication is something not just about what we say, but what also arrives on the other side. The next session is going to be later on the African story, on a changing narrative. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, we'd like to have your applause because we need to leave quickly for the next session to start.
My pleasure.
A pleasure.